Hello, good morning and good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining FSMA Friday for January 2021. That's year 2 of pandemic, if you're keeping check. My name is Aaron Bolshaw, VP of Marketing for SafetyChain and the moderator for FSMA Fridays. For those of you joining us for the first time, FSMA Friday, an ongoing monthly industry update for food and beverage facility operators, CPG operators, QA, safety, compliance professionals, and the like, from the shop floor up into the executive room. So we partner with the Acheson Group to bring you presentations on a whole bunch of topics revolving around Food Safety Modernization Act. So, and today's presentation, kind of nice. It's been a while. It seemed like it was just yesterday, but we're going to dig into how the opening up of the remote audit is going, get an update from the Acheson Group, and so this is really nicely timed. So for today, we've got a half hour. We're going to keep it lively. Everyone's on mute. We want to hear from you, though. Use that questions box in the webinar panel to your right to send us questions through the presentation. We'll save them for the end, and we'll get to as many as we can. So with that, I would like to introduce our presenter today. Rich Simmons is Senior Advisor for the Acheson Group, specifically around food safety. So specifically in GFSI, to many years experience. This is fun. You completed over 200 SQF and 100 BRC audits. That's a lot. That is supremely. I think if there's somebody keeping track somewhere, you're on the leaderboard. So you've also held positions of certification manager and technical ops manager at MSF International, and really you've been in that mode. You're responsible for the certification body management of SSC, IFS, BRC, SQF standards, and a whole bunch of other acronyms that we're all very familiar with. So Rich, with that, welcome and thank you for joining FSMA Friday.
Thank you, Aaron, and I'm very pleased to be here today, and welcome to everyone. We're going to jump right into the session. So we're going to first of all talk about the latest FSMA updates. The first one on the list is FSMA's been around 10 years. They had their anniversary on January 4th, 2011. And so that was when the FDA signed FSMA into law. And as they state, it's not enough to respond to outbreaks of foodborne illness. We must prevent them from happening in the first place. So that's a really important milestone. And when we look back, there's been a lot accomplished with FSMA and the different rules that have come in over time. So that's a great milestone. The second update is VQIP application portal is now open. VQIP is the Voluntary Qualifier Import Program, and their portal is available now, and you can reach it by contacting the FDA and following the links to that. The third update is the FDA clarifying descriptions to the food traceability list, and they published the FAQs on food traceability proposed rule, and you can go onto the FDA site and find the updated list now, and also the FAQs. All right, without any further ado, the topic for today is remote GFSI audits. And so the things I'm going to hit on today are GFSI position. And you'll find that the GFSI position really mirrors SQFI, BRC, and FSSC, and basically because of the GFSI guidance document is really important part of their of what they do. And I'm also at the tail end of the talk, I'm going to talk about remote audit experience and any tips that can be pushed forward to industry. Mm-hmm. Okay, so the GFSI position, I'm going to read the first part. On June 11th, 2020, GFSI approved the amended benchmarking requirement that will allow the use of information communication technology, or ICT, and we'll call it ICT from here on in, less of a mouthful, as part of the GFSI benchmark certification audits. The decision by the GFSI board was made after careful consideration and feedback from various shareholders involved in the process. So June 11th is when they pushed this forward. This was in response to the COVID-19 pandemic, but at the same time, it was also a coming together of technology that that enabled some aspects of audits to be done virtually. So this will allow CPOs or certified program owners such as SQF, BRC, FSSC, and IFS to begin using remote activity as part of their GFSI benchmark process. So the use of remote technologies is not a mandatory step. The preference is still to have a live auditor on site, but if it's mutually agreed, then the audit can be done remotely, provided that the GMP portion of the audit is done on site. So that's the GFSI stance on this. So full remote audits is not, and GFSI recognition do not go together. So a partial or hybrid approach to auditing where documentation and records and other things that could be shared through computers is definitely part of the GFSI rules, but they do want an auditor on site. They do think that not having an auditor at the site does compromise what the auditor may find. And some of the examples of how that could occur would be that the auditor can't look in all directions. They're not their own eyes. Somebody else has their eyes for them, and they can't use their nose to smell different things. They can't use their intuition because they're not on site. You only get what the camera lens gives you. So that's their position on that. Okay, so for a full audit, there has to be a GMP component. And one of their rules is that the GMP element has to be done within 30 days of when documents are looked at. So that's a set rule, and you'll find when we get to the different standards that they've all exercised that same rule to comply with GFSI. Okay, each CPO may implement different criteria, but in all cases, a risk assessment must be completed to ensure the efficiency and integrity of the audit. And part of that is, what is the capability of the site to be able to do a remote audit, to be able to project images, to project records and documents. So that has to be assessed very carefully, because if they cannot, then the audit is not going to work. So SQF, their standard, you'll find that there's a lot of commonality between SQF, BRC, and FSSC in this case. So their standard does allow a full remote audit, but GFSI logo will not be on the certificate. So it's not a GFSI backed audit, but they do allow it. Again, as I mentioned before, the integrity of the audit has to be confirmed. There has to be a risk assessment done. They also do as mentioned earlier, the partial remote audit, where a date can be set to look at documents, records, policies, procedures, and anything else that could be shared from a screen-to-screen basis over a distance. 50% of the time still needs to be at the GMP part of the audit. Okay. So moving to the BRC standard, the slide is basically exactly the same because the elements are exactly the same. So I'm not going to go over it, but it's the same thing. The 30 days for the partial or hybrid audit, and 100% is permitted, but the GFSI logo will not be part of the package. For FSSC, as I said earlier, it's the same thing. They're going to allow full remote audits and partial audits. For FSSC, the obvious part of a partial audit would be to do stage 1, where the stage 1 could be done remotely, and stage 2 could be done by an auditor on site, or part of the stage 2 could be done remotely, and part of it can be done on site, following the same rules as the others to comply with GFSI. But they do also allow a full remote audit without GFSI logo being part of the certificate. So next few slides are about tips for sites to enable remote audits. The first part is be prepared. The audit will not go well if you haven't got all of your documents lined up in a systematic order, and the best systematic is the order in which the audit flows, being as all these standards are numbered, being able to go by number and have them ready to show an auditor or ready for the auditor to have a look at them as you watch on. So being familiar with the audiovisual platforms such as Zoom, Microsoft Teams, BlueJeans, GoToMeeting, those kinds of platforms are perfect for being able to see the people at the audit, to be able to speak with them, to be able to show things on the camera. That's part of a laptop, and so on. But beyond that, for documents, it's suggested that file sharing programs be used. And I've listed some here: Dropbox, Microsoft OneDrive, and Google Drive, and there are others. You basically are probably familiar with those types of things. The thing is that if the CB recommends using a different drive and you're comfortable with your own drive, you can ask the CB to cooperate using your drive if it's something you're comfortable with versus using one that you've never used before. Mm-hmm. Okay, so having those are really important, lined up. For the audio-visual, Zoom and Microsoft Teams and so on, you should have it loaded on a laptop or a desktop, but also on the phone that you're going to take into the plant to show any different things live. So having that same platform versus using a different platform for your phone versus your computer.
Yeah, Rich, I had a question about the file sharing. Now, this is something too that when you open that up and you share that file, it's going to be just one file. There's going to be some sort of organization inside of that as well you want to set up, right? So we talk often about, hey, let's make this easy on the auditor as well. Any recommendations for how to set that up, or is it really just depend on what kind of audit you're really running and what you're wanting to do? You're saying just run the standard, right? But any other tips on setting up that file sharing?
Oh, yeah, definitely, Aaron. The biggest tip I can offer here is that you should set up folders based on the numbering system of the standard that you're working with. So for BRC, it would go from 1.1, 2.1, and so on, right through to whatever number you're going to, and having all your files in order of how it comes from the standard. That way the auditor's not confused, and if the auditor comes back with a question and you don't know where the auditor is, you just ask the question, what clause are you on? He'll say 2.3.2, and you have that systematic way of getting to that file and seeing what document he's looking at.
Okay, that's fantastic. And so also I have to mention, SafetyChain customers have an added benefit here. They don't need any file sharing system. This is absolutely, all of this is done with a secure profile login. The auditor themselves get a login to your records, and you get to specify very specifically which records they can see and have access to. So it's actually, you won't open up too much, right? You'll make sure that you run right to that standard and it's all secure. So thanks for that. I appreciate it, Rich.
Okay, Some other things, your files that you load up, where possible, they should be read-only files. You don't want a file that could be edited. So just make sure you protect your own documents from that point of view. Confidentiality of the site is really, really key and important. So again, if you have your own site, if you're using SafetyChain, or if you're using others, then you know what you need to do for your own protection. If you're using the site that's been recommended by the certification body, then make sure you ensure that they have a protected site for you. Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay, so the documentation part of a remote audit, and if you're doing a partial or hybrid where you're doing a documentation audit, and then you're going to go and do a GMP audit, they, as I mentioned before, they have to be 30 days apart minimum. So it has to be within that 30-day range. If you're doing a full remote and you have all your documents loaded, the audit has to be done simultaneously, right through from the documentation record component through to the site visit. So there cannot be day gaps between those two pieces if you're doing the remote audit 100%. Okay, some other tips. You're on Zoom or a different package for audio visual. Make sure if you have 3 or 4 people in the room that the speaker is centrally located, and if you have a large table, you may need to move the microphone to the person speaking, or have that person socially distanced, but come closer to the microphone so that there's no issues with the audio portion. All right. Okay, so on site, again, if it's partial, then you need to be there within 30 days. So when you're setting this up, expect that the auditor is going to do the document audit, then come at some arranged time to come to your site. As of right now, there are no unannounced audits. That's going to change depending on the pandemic. So I'm not in a position to be able to talk to unannounced audits right now, but if you keep an eye on what your standard owner is saying to you, then you go to their sites and see what their position is, because we do fully expect that the unannounced audits will come back into play as soon as it's travel safe. Okay, for fully remote audits, really key here is making sure that you test your systems prior to the audit. If you're going to go with Zoom out into your plant, you need to know that you have a signal that can carry you through virtually every place that has production occurring. If there's some remote areas that there is no signal, and you can expect to have some of that. You can't have signal everywhere inside a concrete plant or a steel plant. Then you can arrange the audit where the risk is right, that you can, at the auditor's say so, go and do a film session, video filming using your smartphone, and then load that in the shared site. Okay, so it's really critical that you have a signal, you have Wi-Fi. So if you're looking to do this, you're expected to ensure that signal exists. That may mean you have to upgrade either your router or put in boosters to boost the signal in certain areas in your plant, so that you can have a signal as you go through with your video component. All right. So again, the ICT you use is up to you. The auditor is going to want to know what you're using. So the most common for the visual is going to be using a cell phone. If you're using a cell phone, it's really important that you practice because cell phones jiggle with your hands. So you need to know how to hold it steady. So doing a little bit of practice is really going to help go a long way with that. Also, when you're using a cell phone or other device, it's better to have the audio in your ear versus coming out of the speaker of the phone, because you get into noisy areas and nothing could be heard. So by having having a headphone on or an earbud, you can hear directly, and you can do as you may not be able to speak to the auditor in that environment, but you certainly can follow his instructions on what he wants to see or she wants to see. All right. For interviews, the best experience is to schedule the interviews, and the auditor will say that I'd like to speak to this person in 25 minutes. That gives you a little bit of lead time, and then that person can be brought to the boardroom where it's quieter, and you can practice social distancing, and the interview can take place. We've had really good experiences with scheduled interviews. The auditor is going to want to keep interviews based on a random basis in terms of selection, but the scheduling has really helped in terms of the success of interviews. All right. So
I love that, Rich. I mean, take a day, run through this, go through the exact walking of the place, check that freezer. If you're going in there and there's part of it, do you need to leave the door open? I don't know. Like this is really critical. It seems elementary, but wow, great recommendations there.
Yeah, and as far as freezers and coolers go, they tend to be areas that the signal just doesn't cross into them because of they're insulated, they're steel on two sides usually, and they're very difficult to get a signal in there. Yep. The freezer and a cooler may be one of the areas that would be prime for a videotaping, where you would go in and shoot a video and when the auditor wants it, and then load it onto the shared site, because our experience with freezers has not been good for Wi-Fi. And you don't want to put your router in the freezer. It's probably not a good idea. All right, that brings us to a close of the main topics I was going to talk about. So just in conclusion, SQF, CRC, FSSC accept both partial and fully remote audits. Fully remote audits are not permitted to carry the GFSI logo for any GFSI standard. Partial remotes are a permanent addition to standards that will not be phased out after the pandemic. So that's a really important point. This is a move forward. It's, pandemic pushed it into place, but it's not going to go away after the pandemic. Organize and plan documents and records and have them available to the start of the audit. And as was mentioned, use a file system where you use the numbers of the standard to organize your files, so that it makes everything easier for the auditor and for you in terms of getting through that information. Check your Wi-Fi connectivity and plan to add additional routers or boosters if the signals weaken in any areas, especially production areas. Practice the on-site with your ICT so you can improve your technique in advance in advance of the audit. And part of that practice could be that you go down as a team and there's one person who is in charge of the phone, the other person does the audio, versus just one person doing everything. That is a suggestion. Certainly it can be done either way. That brings us to a close. So I'm going to turn it back over to Aaron.
All right, thanks, Rich. Yeah, we got a bunch of cool questions. Great, timely stuff. I love this. Gosh, it seems like we were talking before we started the presentation, Rich, and it seemed like just yesterday that GFSI came out and said, okay, let's start really getting in tune with the ICT, and let's let people do this. So Thank you very much. We do have a few questions. I wanted to start with a comment from Jan, though. She had a good sort of thought here. She said, I understand the idea beyond numbering, behind numbering folders according to the code. Just be aware that the code numbers can change, right? And then you have to renumber everything. She says she saw this happen in an audit. It was a real pain. So just be aware of that. Thank you for that comment, Jan. I've got Jennifer asking, what about IFS position?
So IFS position, from the research that I've done, is that they still are not permitting the remote audits. That I expect to change, and it may have changed now, but when I went to their site, I saw no information on this, and their position earlier November was definitely that they are not supporting that this time.
Okay, got it. Another question, real good. Are certificates without the GFSI logo accepted by suppliers and retailers? I think I know the answer to this, but Susan was asking.
Okay, that's a great question, actually, and the answer is it depends.
Yeah.
There are some supplier or some customers that are demanding to have the GFSI recognition, and if that's one of your customers is on that list, then you obviously need to go with the partial remote audit. There's a lot of understanding with doing full remotes, and my understanding, there are full remotes going on right now, right across North America. And so they are happening, but you just have to check with your customers. And like I said, there's a high level of understanding. Obviously, everybody knows what the situation is here with the pandemic and traveling. Even auditors aren't all that crazy about getting on airplanes, knowing the risks, and sites aren't all that keen on having someone coming from an area that may have a lot of cases of COVID-19, and they're coming to an area that doesn't have very many, and you don't know what you're getting. So there's still a lot of risk with that. There's a lot of understanding at the same time.
Yeah, I think the key there is definitely keep open communications. Let's just make sure everyone is understanding what it is we are looking at when we do see that, hey, I'm missing the GFSI logo, but we have to understand the audit still took place and it's there and it's documented. So
yeah.
So here's an interesting one. So and this is an odds. I'm not sure if you're a bookie or not by day or night, Rich, but somebody had a fun question. What do you think the odds are that GFSI will at some point accept a fully remote audit?
Do you want Las Vegas odds or?
Yeah. 4-1? No, it's a good question. I just think it was interesting to ask Kathy. I appreciate that. We don't know. I think that, I'll take a hazard. I'll hazard a guess at this. Listen, the more GFSI gets comfortable with how these are going, and the more they're seeing that the remote audits are working, these partial ones, I think you'll see that they'll kind of open it up a little bit more and be able to be more fully remote. I think the key here is to get some under your belt, right? Understand how the remote audit process can help. You saw it in a slide a couple of minutes ago. Rich had it. He said it saves a ton of money. So your organization is going to love this as well. Let's practice them. Let's get these going and get comfortable with them. I see a future where fully remote is a lot easier.
Yeah, I do too, Aaron. In fact, I do think, my guess, if I were going to guess, is that GFSI will at a later time permit fully remote under certain conditions where you've been able to confirm their ability to provide a full audit service.
Yeah. Yep, exactly. So another question Liz has coming in late here. How will partially remote audits work with unannounced SQF audit?
That's a hard question to answer. I think it's going to work fairly well. You just have to, it may be that the document component is going to come after the GMP, or the GMP component is the only part that's going to be unannounced.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how some of them have occurred in the history anyway, where the document piece can be done on a scheduled basis, so you know that the right person who can handle these documents is going to be there, and then the GMP part where you're going to see the plant conditions is done without any confirmation of a scheduled date.
Yeah, and I would like to note on a sister webinar that we produced, Rich, called Beyond Compliance. We just had Leanne Chuboff and she's the VP of Technical Affairs at SQFI. She went through, because think about it, right? SQF is in the middle of 8.1 to 9, right? They're very busy rolling this out. There's these migration patterns and things like this. And as an astute visitor here today, Brenda noted, she goes, hello, I thought there would be no unannounced in the meantime. Pretty much right now what Leanne said is, hey, it's going easy right now. The unannounced SQFs are sort of, they're chilling because listen, we're going to 9. Their focus is on getting to 9. May 24th is that date, and I encourage anyone that wants to go to SafetyChain.com, go look at our resources. We have that available as a replay. But I don't think that we need to worry about that in the immediate future. So one more question here, I think, Rich, and we're past our time. I appreciate everyone taking some time. And again, so a couple of things, right? A lot of content on SafetyChain, tons of great information from TAG. If you don't subscribe to the newsletter, please do so. Check them out. And we're always online, the FSMA Friday LinkedIn group. Please join us if you haven't. Last question, is are remote audits recorded by the auditing body and become a part of the auditing, or I'm sorry, a part of the audit record? That's a really good question from Constance. I don't really know do you know, Rich, are they recording it and then it becomes a part of the record?
Right now it's not a requirement, and right now I do not believe anybody's doing it as part of the record for sure. Okay. It may be that you're doing it, so you can refer back to it. An auditor might want to look back on it to complete the report, but it is definitely not part of the report process.
Yeah, I think they're still really constant. They're really just looking at the documents and the proof points that you're putting in for the audit right now. Similarly, so if you think about it, let's pretend there's no remote audits, it's just an on-site audit, there's no pandemic. They would never have to go back to any audio-visual proof of that right now. Who knows what the future holds, though? That's a great question, Constance.
Yep.
All right. Well, listen, next month, we've got Senior Director of Food Safety joining us, February 26th. Don't miss it. Rich, been a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining FSMA Friday today. As always, we hope to have you again, and we hope you're doing well there. Everyone, appreciate your time. And that ends the episode. Thank you so much and have a great day.
Thank you, everyone.